Tonight on Hotline, Ron Jay would like to hear from you. Whether you agree or disagree, give Hotline a call and tell our guest what you think. And now, here's Ron.
Deficit spending.
Yeah. And a good morning to you, and welcome to our Hotline program. This morning, pardon me, that's a good way to start out, isn't it? We're a little bit late here. The special Primary 72 program that came out at 12 o'clock for 10 minutes made us 10 minutes late. I'm glad that you stayed with us. We have a most interesting guest for you. His name is Randy Wicker, and he co-authored this book called The Gay Crusaders, which is about, they call it the America's newest sexual revolution. I don't know what's new about homosexuality. I guess it's been around for centuries and centuries and thousands of years, but they call it the newest sexual revolution, and maybe it is. Maybe you can explain that to us. First, welcome to Pittsburgh, and welcome to Hotline also, Randy. Is that your real name, Randy Wicker?
It is my real name.
And that's what you were born with and given?
Well, it's funny you open on that. Originally,
I wasn't going to. The thought just occurred to me. There's that kind of show.
I'll go this. I was born Charles Hayden, Jr., and my father was a junior executive with American Agricultural Chemical Company. And about 12 years ago, when I began making appearances on television and radio as a homosexual, my father was a lower echelon executive on his way up, and he said, "It's your life. I wish you well, but don't involve my good name." So at that time, I assumed the name Randolph Hayden Wicker as a pseudonym. And I became known as that name, and then I went into business. My father died in the meantime, and I legally changed my name then to Randolph Hayden Wicker, since everybody knew me as that name. And I only say this because, I always say, if you have a kid, don't name him a junior, because everybody's their first themselves and not a second somebody else.
All right. Now, what this book, it's a most interesting book, and it might give a lot of people a lot of insight that they do not now have. Some may have it, but others may lack the insight into the problems of a homosexual in this country. And although you may at first, there is much prejudice, of course, let's face it, in the heterosexual world against homosexuals, there are certain things that I think most people would not agree should exist, such as the employment, thing against employment, the ban from working because a man is a homosexual. Now, maybe there will be people who will call and agree that homosexuals should not work, I guess.
Well, it depends on what area of employment. In East Lansing, Michigan, and San Francisco, they've just passed a bill banning discrimination in employment, including homosexuals, under the Human Rights Bill. They recently had a similar bill in New York, and the objections seem to center on whether firemen, policemen, and teachers whether homosexuals should be allowed to be firemen because they all slept in the firehouse at night, policemen, I guess, because they're authority figures, and teachers. And the arguments against the teachers that were raised, it wasn't on the basis that a homosexual teacher is going to make a pass at a student or anything like that, but they got into these subtle things about, well, a teacher is an example, and there might be subtle influences. Although a number of teachers came forward and very bravely gave testimony, and their position legally is somewhat tenuous in the sense that the teachers union backs them up, but the Board of Education doesn't have, in New York City, doesn't have any set policy in this particular area.
Now, Randy, one of the big arguments that you put forth in the book concerning that, the idea of a homosexual, for instance, being a teacher and setting an example, is that you say that homosexuality is not a sickness. And
it's not contagious.
And it's not contagious.
You are or are not a homosexual. It isn't something you become by choice.
See, I have to differ with you. I have to argue with you on that one point there. Because there are some homosexuals who are that way because of either environment or because of a background that has caused them to go that route.
Well,
now, that doesn't mean that all homosexuals are sick people.
But not through, it's not something that happens through seduction or anything like that. The background is just that they grew up in a society and they found the existing heterosexual norms not to their liking, whether it was the way they perceive their own parental relationships.
You're going to tell me now that homosexuals are clean-cut people that don't seduce other people who are not involved in homosexuality?
The average homosexual is interested in going to bed with an equal partner. I mean, a heterosexual is a very lousy bedmate. There are homosexuals who may make passes at heterosexuals, but the overwhelming majority of homosexuals are not interested in going to bed with heterosexuals. Of course, heterosexuals are not likely to meet this particular majority of homosexuals. They're more likely to meet the lone and somewhat atypical homosexual who might make a proposition.
The expression used, however, is coming out. Now, if a homosexual causes a young person to come out?
Homosexual.
Maybe they would not have come out.
No, you come out as accepting and admitting to yourself what you are. Coming out is not turning anyone into a homosexual. See, a lot of homosexuals
Right.
go through periods where they're trying to suppress themselves. They say, I'm not really that way. They might get involved with a girl or even force themselves into marriage. But then they realize at a certain point that this is not what their particular emotional tendencies are. So then they come to terms with themselves and say, I am a homosexual. And when a person does that and then goes and starts going out into homosexual social circles, to clubs, and admitting and functioning socially as a homosexual, that's what we call coming out. It doesn't
Right.
have anything to do, I mean, a person can be still in the closet,
All right,
so
fine.
to speak,
Then
and be quite
I
homosexual.
did use the term wrong, and I realize that now, and I learned that from your book also, the coming out idea. But if a homosexual does take a young person and turn them, not turn them, that's not true at all, but lead them into a life of homosexuality where they might not have been led.
No, I don't think that's the case. You may have a situation in which a younger person is seduced into some sort of sexual relationship with a homosexual. That will not turn that younger person homosexual unless the person is already a homosexual.
Okay.
It's usually a passing phase or an experience, because your sex attitudes are set by your relationship with your parents and the way you perceive society as a whole. I mean, if you went out tonight and went to bed with a homosexual, you're not going to immediately say, whoopee, wow, this is, this is for me, this doesn't happen. If you're basically heterosexual, even if you end up having a homosexual encounter, it's not going to affect your basic sexual outlook or orientation.
Okay, let's get to you. I started to tell about the book, and I think really you should be telling about the book and not me. Yeah. But I do want to say, I was going to talk about Kay Tobin for a second. I don't know too much about Kay Tobin. You wrote for the Herald Tribune. Did you have any problems as a homosexual working
Well,
for...
I was a freelance writer. I was published in the Herald Tribune and the
What articles were you writing? Were you writing on homosexuality?
No, I wrote, I did a feature on a narcotics addict, on heroin use in New York City. I'd done programming for the Pacifica Radio Network in New York. It's subscriber-supported radio. My first program with them was a panel of homosexuals speaking as homosexuals in 1962, and this caused quite a big sensation. At that time, it was big news. Homosexuals on the air for the first time. We got a review by Jack Gould, a full page in Newsweek magazine, a feature story in the New York Times. Of course, today, homosexuals being on the air, it happens in every city of the country. It's accepted as just another topic for discussion. And I stayed on with them after starting this program, and I did programming mainly on social problem areas.
Was your, what I'm really concerned about, was after it was found, after your coming out, after everybody knew that you were a homosexual, did it affect the acceptance of your work as a writer?
In one way. I ended up being the men's magazine editor at Countrywide Publications, in which I oversaw about 5 or 6 of these, I guess, men's or girly magazines. And I was in charge of this whole section, and there was a write-up in The Realist by Dick Schaap of the Herald Tribune. He originally did it for the Herald Tribune, and it was a humorous article. You know, he has the kind of job most men would die for. He's editor of girly magazines, Marilyn Monroe calendars on his wall, but he's a homosexual. And it was a very light, tongue-in-cheek, and very entertaining write-up. And the editor of the Herald Tribune says, we don't write about homosexuals this way. So Dick ended up publishing it in The Realist, which then was about the only underground publication in the country. And this came out in my office. Woman editor, the beauty editor across the way, got The Realist, and she read it and immediately recognized, me from the description. At that time, I was still working under my given name of Charles Hayden. She went into the boss and said, look, he's a homosexual. You have to fire him. Well, I had been there for a number of months, and it was very funny because instead of being a negative prejudice against me, the boss seemed to be very intimidated. I was doing a very good job, and when we had another opening, he said to the personnel manager, get me another one of those homosexual geniuses, which I thought was sort of very amusing. It was sort of a reverse prejudice.
Well, the boss was only concerned then...
He didn't like the fact that I said the boss wouldn't know a good-looking woman if he fell over one. That was the only thing he took exception to in the article, was my criticism of his taste in women. But outside of that...
well, he was concerned with your production, not...
Right, and I had proven myself on the job, and, I think it actually, in that creative particular field, it added a certain degree to my mystique. Now, if I had gone in there originally, and somehow he had known I was homosexual before he hired me, I probably would have never had the chance to prove myself in that job.
Okay, we have to take a moment out, but I want you to think about sort of organizing your mind so you can answer this question when we come back, the idea of what the gay liberation movement is all about. What are the gays after? And we'll talk about that after this message.
Poor Yardbird. Spends most of his day running back and forth, turning the water on and off. Now there's a new system, Gardena. At the end of this hose is our exclusive water stop feature. It lets you change the nozzle without going back to shut off the water. Click the water's on, click the water's off, and get the same click-on convenience at the faucet. To convert your present hose, use these click-on converters. Look for Gardena. I'll be looking for you.
Get Gardena products at any of these fine stores.
Western Pennsylvania National Bank announces free checking, absolutely free, because we want to be your bank.
Channel 11 recently sponsored a contest for students asking them to write, "Pittsburgh turns me on because." Runner-up Karen Dorbin of Latimer Junior High School said,
"Pittsburgh is people. It's the Pirates winning the World Series. It's a friendly hello when entering the Civic Arena. It's riding the incline atop the city with a friend. It's meeting a stranger and making a new friend. Turn on with happy people. Come to Pittsburgh."
Someone's waiting for you somewhere along the way at the sign that says welcome at the end of the day. See you down the road at a Best Western Motel.
Best Western, best everywhere.
All right, now let's talk about the gay liberation itself. Incidentally, in the book, there are several, what they are is case studies, and you and Kay
They're
actually
not
report.
stories. Case studies sounds like psychiatric material. This is essentially...
It wasn't intended to sound like that, but they are studies of different cases, different
different people,
profiles.
right.
And
these are real people. Their pictures are in there. They range from Jack Baker, who was just reelected president of the student body of the University of Minnesota, to Dick Michaels, who began a little mimeograph sheet a few years ago and now has a 40-page nationally circulated newspaper with a paid staff of a half a dozen people, circulation of 40,000. Reverend Troy Perry, who started the Church for Homosexuals, and now there are 26 branches of that church in various parts of the country. They bought a church building in downtown Los Angeles and had I think he has something like a congregation now of 12 or 1,500 people.
Okay, what is the Gay Crusade about? What is gay liberation about? What do gay people in this country want?
They want what everybody else takes for granted: the right to be secure in their jobs, the right to go to a university or to hold any sort of security clearance, the right to get a license, the right to be able to rent any apartment. They want the securities and rights that any other American, and the right to assemble peaceably in clubs or social bars of their choice without fear of being raided or arrested, and also just the status of legality in some 45 states out of the, or 44 states out of the 50, homosexual acts are still anywhere from a misdemeanor to a felony, and you might get up to 10 years in as many as 10 or 15 different states if you're convicted of homosexual acts, despite all the recommendations of every learned body of lawyers that has ever made a study. All model penal codes have recommended removing private acts between consenting adults from penal statutes.
We have some pretty archaic laws concerning heterosexual activities too on the books, as a matter of fact.
Right, as a matter of fact,
what you're saying is that between consenting adults,
the crime against nature statute, you know, covers in many cases both heterosexual and homosexual acts. Like the sodomy statutes in New York, they repealed it for homosexuals, but they said now that heterosexual married couples can do in private what they like. They specifically rewrote the law legalizing sodomy for heterosexual married couples, but not for heterosexual unmarried couples or for homosexuals. They reduced it to a misdemeanor, which is 30 days to a year, which is a big step down from felony. But it isn't that you're prosecuted under these laws. See, the problem with these laws is that they're rarely enforced. But if you work for the post office or you work for a large corporation, you're dismissed for being homosexual, you go into court to fight for your rights. One of the arguments used against you is we can't have someone working for our company who indulges in criminal activity. So these laws essentially brand a whole group of people.
in other words, you're saying it's an excuse that they're using.
Right, it's an excuse, and even though you've never been arrested or convicted, it sort of throws a moral taint. It puts you in the status of being an illegal person. For instance, you have gay bars and clubs in every large city of the country. I've visited several here in Pittsburgh. And these places are technically legal because everybody has a right to assemble and congregate. But if you have a redneck law enforcement sheriff or something who wants to harass these bars. They raid them on the pretext saying that, well, maybe nothing as illegal is going on, but these people are homosexuals. What they do is illegal, and they're gathering there for possibly committing illegal acts in the future. And these are the kind of legal trickery that's used to deny people their right of association.
Okay.
This, by the way, is Gay Lib
Right.
Coming to Pittsburgh. This is a new newspaper which just came out this weekend here called the Pittsburgh Gay Times.
Well, I want to show it because there are some people who might pick it up and want to buy it and think that it's about nightlife or something.
Well, it is. There's a lot of it is about homosexual nightlife. They have ads for the bars
let's have
and
a gay
that's,
time tonight. Let's have a nice time, you know, and they might get mixed up.
Well, I think it's educational.
Don't you
I think
that they should know, though, exactly what it means?
Well, I think all you have to do is pick up and look through it. I mean, there's nothing
you
obscene
might
about it.
just
It's
buy
a
it if
regular,
you're
it's a
visiting
regular
town, you wanna find out
newspaper. When
what's-
you open it up, it's, you know, gay activism comes to Pittsburgh. And while I'm at it, let me say that they say anyone interested in joining a gay lib group here can contact them by writing Post Office Box 10184, Shadyside, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's Pittsburgh Gay Times, Post Office Box 10184, Shadyside, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I bought this at a bookstore out on Forbes Avenue, a block from the university, but they only had a few copies left. I'm sure if anyone's interested, they can send 50 cents. They'd be glad to mail a copy of the paper to the viewer.
One of the interesting aspects in the book that you point out of the gay liberation movement is the prejudice within a prejudice. There is a prejudice. There is male chauvinism
Yeah, that's
on the
what
part of the male homosexuals
say. That's what the women
against
say.
the women. Now, have you noted this yourself? There are women in there, lesbians in the book, who are saying that the men in the gay liberation movement are chauvinists.
Right, and the reason they say that is that homosexuals really are very much like everyone else in the society. We're all raised in one society, so when you have a male organization to begin with, most gay organizations are predominantly male. If you have a general gay lib organization, you usually end up with a 90 or 95% male membership. This has been solved by a lot of groups by having women caucuses, and they have private women-only dances or private women-only events to give women a chance to get together without being outnumbered and overrun by men. Now, when they say male chauvinism, they mean, for instance, that even in the gay groups, you know, we're going to have a party or a dance, and someone will say, well, why don't you girls fix the coffee and serve the refreshments? And, of course, this is role-playing, which the homosexuals have picked up as much as any other group. Del Martin and Phyllis Lyon, who formed the Daughters of Bilitis, recently denounced the gay lib movement as a male chauvinist movement and said they were going to work more with women's liberation because they were oppressed both as women and as female homosexuals, and they didn't feel that they could ever achieve equality as female homosexuals, so they achieved equality as females first. And
yeah, they have a problem then as women.
But we
on
work
the job.
together. When the National Christopher Street Liberation Day parade happens in New York and Los Angeles, especially in New York, 40% of the people that march are women. This women's liberation thing has done a great deal to raise the consciousness of women, both straight and gay, and has, for a long time, the lesbians were somewhat retiring in the gay lib movement in the sense that they weren't political, their organizations were not political, they tended to be more social. But now in New York, the women's organizations and elsewhere are just as political as the men's organizations. We work together on things. The police raided the Daughters of Bilitis headquarters there. They had a donation at the door, and they were giving away beer, and they came in and charged them with selling beer without a license for 50 cents. And it was just harassment. The charges were kicked out of court. But, you know, they rushed over to the men's group, and then we all went down and we picketed at the police station and raised a fuss about it till they were released within a couple hours after the harassment took place. And Mayor Lindsay's aide intervened to have the charges dropped.
All right, we have to take a moment out here, and when we come back, we will go directly to our phones. We will not pass go, and you will not collect $500 or something like that. We'll be back in just a moment.
Little girls, they're wonderful. I'm Errol Parsegian, football coach of Notre Dame, and I have a kid sister. Well, she's not so small anymore, and she has MS, multiple sclerosis, a great crippler of young adults. MS is a disease of the central nervous system, and the cause and cure are unknown. But there is hope through research sponsored by the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. When your MS volunteer calls, please give generously.
Hi, this is Bill Cosby. You know, in most communities, equal job opportunities just doesn't exist at all. I mean, if you ask most employers, you say, do you have Mexican, Puerto Rican, black man, Chinese, or whatever working for you? He may just say, well, no, I sure would like to have one. I'd like to find a good. So, you see, that's the problem. They can't find a good. Now, what does that mean? That means that either he hasn't looked for one, or he hasn't thought about one, or he doesn't even particularly care. Now, if you want some advice, if your company or your union needs technical assistance in creating equal job opportunities, then write EEOC, Washington, D.C. The manpower's there. You let the commission help you.
Okay, let's go to our phones, if you will, please. Hello, Hotline.
Ron.
Yes.
Hi. Could I speak to Mr. Wiggins, please?
I'm
Yes.
here.
Randy.
Yes.
You know, it's funny, but a few of the things you said, and personally, to me, anybody can be what they want to be. You know, it's their prerogative. Now, I knew of a group of boys, I'll say about 8 years ago, that one of them had been indoctrinated by an older man, you know, and the man paid him. So he got 3 or 4 of his buddies and figured, hey, this is a good way for us to make bread, you know. So
He was a prostitute.
Huh?
He was a prostitute.
He was 12 years old.
Well, okay, go ahead.
I'm speaking of young boys, you know.
Yeah.
And they found out that this older man had other friends who wished to be this way, and, you know, the younger the better. And it kept on, and the group getting bigger, and, you know, and this happened. Now, these are all white people, the white boys I'm speaking of, not that I am trying to segregate or anything. And they did not become homosexuals, though. Most of these boys did marry, I think, out of the 12 that I knew of, and I couldn't do a thing about it.
I think what Randy was saying is that the boys became prostitutes, right?
The boys were prostituting themselves. The age there is very young. I don't think that you'd find most homosexuals are interested in 12-year-old boys. I mean, most homosexuals, like most heterosexuals, may find people in their late teens and early 20s very attractive, but I think when you get to 12, I mean, a 12-year-old isn't the most scintillating conversation or company, you know, and certainly in a one-way paid relationship with a heterosexual, it certainly wouldn't be sexually attractive to a large number of homosexuals. I'm not denying that this did happen, but I'm sure that you could go out and find 12, 13, 14-year-old girls who went downtown Pittsburgh or wherever where they knew that men would approach them and give them money for sexual favors, that you would probably have a heterosexual prostitution in the same age range and you know, to the same degree. I think it's an unpleasant situation and unfortunate, but I don't think it's typical.
I hope not. But anyway, another thing about it, it just seemed that the other boys followed along on the same accords, you know.
Well, I think the very interesting and very important point here is that they did not become homosexual. They've done studies of various young males that have engaged in prostitution habits like this, and they find that generally that these things do not turn them into homosexuals. It's like I said before, sexual orientation is fixed early in life, and homosexual encounters, even if they're doing it for financial gain, doesn't change a person's sexual orientation.
Okay, I thank you for calling, ma'am. Goodbye. Hello, Hotline.
Ron.
Yes, sir.
Is it Mr. Wiggins, your guest?
Wicker.
Wicker?
Yes.
Okay, I have 2 short questions. First of all, I'd like to know, is homosexuality a normal form of sexual activity?
It's a normal variation of sexual orientation.
But it's not the most common form, right?
No, it's in the population at large, 4% of your population is exclusively homosexual, the males. And when you get up to maybe a 12 or 16% bracket, when you include people who have a fairly extensive history of bisexual activity, in other words, maybe for a 3 or 4 year period, homosexuality was their major source of sexual outlet, or they went through a sexual involvement of some sort. Maybe sometimes this is just a situation involving the service.
I have to ask this gentleman a question, though. I want to know if you're asking Randy if homosexuality is normal to homosexuals, or is it normal generally?
No, I mean generally. I mean,
Well, obviously, no.
Well, now wait a minute. Exclusive homosexuality is not statistically. You know, normality has to do with statistics. 37% of your male population, according to the Kinsey researchers, has one homosexual orgasm at least between puberty and old age. But another 15%, 37%, but 15% more have fantasies and desires that they never act out. So you really get down to a figure of 52% of your male population who to some small degree, a homosexual fantasy or homosexual activity to some small degree enters into their sex life. This does not mean that, of course, 52% of the male population is homosexual. Only 4% to 10% or 4% exclusively homosexual, and the Kinsey studies were 12, another 8% bisexual.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm a college student, and from my classes, I've understood that about 80% of normal or of sexual activity is heterosexual. Now, if this is true, which it may or may not be, I would just like to know that this, let's say, 20%, or we can argue about 16%, or...
Doesn't matter, just the minority percent.
Okay, the minority percent. Then I'd just like to know, why do these, let's say, the lesser percent persist at public places in Pittsburgh? Now, I've known this personally to happen to me. In groups of 2 or more, let's say homosexuals, come to a person and try to, you know, more or less, you know, say things to them which would get them to come with them or things like this.
Try to pick up somebody is what you're saying.
Yeah, right.
Well, depending on the social circumstances, I think it's within the range of normality that any male will go out and try to pick up someone that he finds attractive. I do not think that people should be grossly offended if someone makes a very subtle overture to them of a sexual nature. You should consider it a compliment that they find you attractive. This doesn't mean that I condone those very few homosexuals that might order in toilets or accost people in a very gross and specifically genital sort of way. The majority of homosexuals, of course, the average heterosexual never sees, because the majority of homosexuals here in Pittsburgh gather in the 3 or 4 private clubs and the 2 or 3 public bars, which cater to them. We have our own world, and those homosexuals you never see. See, the only homosexuals the average heterosexual sees are 3 groups. The ones that are extremely transvestitic and go and sort of make a spectacle of their cross-dressing on the street. Those that accost people or try to go out and pick up heterosexuals, which, as I said, heterosexuals really make very, very unsatisfactory bed partners for the majority of homosexuals. They're very inhibited, they're very limited in bed, they're emotionally frigid when it comes to being reciprocal in a homosexual relationship. You know, homosexuals are not looking just for genital or sexual release. They're looking for emotional, affectionate relationships, and a heterosexual has no capacity in that regard.
Have one-night stands just like heterosexuals. So what are you talking about?
They do, but most
looking for emotions and deep meaning.
Well, most heterosexuals are looking for a love relationship. The average heterosexual doesn't spend his life going from one night stand to the next, and those homosexuals who do are generally looking for love affairs and just haven't been able to find one or establish one. It's more difficult to establish a homosexual relationship and maintain it. I've been with my lover for 8 years, but that, you know, when you get into long-term relationships, you're really dealing with a minority of homosexuals. I think the really legitimate research has shown as much as 40% of the male population, homosexual population, doesn't have a enduring relationship that lasts over a year or more.
Well, why is that? Why does that happen with homosexuals?
Well, because there's nothing holding you together. I mean, you move in, you have a fight, all the pressures are for you to separate. You don't own, the society doesn't recognize your relationship. The family is anxious to break it up. People move in, they break up, move out, and the neighbors couldn't care less. In some cases, 2 men living together arouse suspicion, and in a small town and where social attitudes aren't liberal, it encourages people to move out from each other. And also, I think that you have a... it's funny, I've sort of done the women a little disservice here, because lesbian relationships tend to be much more stable and enduring in the home. They do a much better job of establishing lifelong and long-term relationships than the average males. Now, this doesn't mean that a large number of males don't.
Wait a minute.
No, that's
wait a minute, this gentleman wants to say something here. Let him get in here. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Have you ever had a relationship with a female?
I've had sexual one-night stands with females, but I'm not romantically attracted to women. I enjoy physical relations with them.
The idea that I cannot conceive of a homosexual. You see, I've had 3 cases in public places in Pittsburgh, let's say transportation areas, and there have been more than 2 people that have tried to pick me up that I believe that have approached me in a homosexual manner.
I don't doubt that, probably in bus stations or train stations, but these are two people. There are 50,000 homosexuals probably in greater Pittsburgh, and you've never seen the other 48,998.
Okay,
and
but
these
what
people...
I want to ask is why do people like this, when there are two or more, do they have to have other people to, try to induce other people to...
I have never, I tell you, I have never seen people go out in groups like that and try to pick people up. I would tend to think when people go out to pick up someone for sexual activity, they generally do it on a one-to-one basis. Now, maybe in your case, I don't know what you look like, but maybe the person felt that maybe you're a football player type or something that's physically intimidating, and maybe the guy was a lot smaller or something and wanted to have a friend along for security's sake. That's the only thing I can think of. I'm just, being hypothetical here because I don't know the circumstances.
The question I have is that this has happened to me, and there are two or more, and I just wanted to know if there were two or more, why couldn't they just pair off? As far as I'm concerned, this is fine, because as long as you have homosexual activities, this is fine.
Most homosexuals do here in
public areas.
I don't approve of this. I don't approve of loitering in public places and accosting people who aren't interested in sex. I think that this gives homosexuals all a bad name, and the majority of homosexuals in Pittsburgh, you have very nice private clubs here, and you have a couple bars, and the overwhelming majority of homosexuals in Pittsburgh go there and meet each other and go home and behave themselves in a conventional and private way. But as I said, these are the homosexuals that aren't seen, and these are the homosexuals to a great extent who are involved in the gay liberation movement too, I might add. And so there are two people at the public bus station or wherever these people are toilet, wherever they accosted you, I don't know. But it's not fair to condemn 50,000 people or stigmatize them, and this is the kind of press we get. One guy molests a kid in downtown or in Pittsburgh, and it makes the papers, and everyone says, look, all homosexuals molest little children, or there's some sort of crazy sex crime. Or a guy goes down the street and he sees one very obvious, effeminate, affected, stereotype sort of transvestitic homosexual, and he says, look, that's what homosexuals look like. He doesn't see the 900 other average-looking conventional homosexuals who look like myself, for instance, if I can use myself as an example, that he passes on the street every day and doesn't realize are homosexual. So we have a terrible press, and I think that if you really were aware of the overall scene on this, you'd realize that these people are atypical, and the behavior that they're engaging in, I think, is disapproved of by a large segment of the gay population at large, because they give us all a bad name. I mean, I personally am very disgusted by that. Maybe I'm a little bit puritanical, but I am, and I get mad because it's very difficult for me to sit here. These people are causing problems for others. When they do that to you, I mean, you may have a child or a brother or a relative or even an employee or something who's homosexual, and when you find out, you're probably going to fire him because you're going to think, gee, these guys, they hang out and accost people in
Randy,
public
your
places.
biggest problem is you don't know how to talk. I thank you for calling, sir. Goodbye. I have to ask you a question, though. You mentioned the fact that you are... you use yourself as an example as very male-appearing and
well, average appearing. I don't want to try to sound Charles Atlas or anything.
No, but you are. You're.
I'm an average homosexual. I'm an average homosexual.
You look and act like a typical male. Now, let me ask you this: your relationship with your lover, is he effeminate? Do you prefer the effeminate type? Obviously, you don't.
No, I prefer average, normal, male-appearing people.
Okay, then why are some homosexuals taken to putting on the effeminate attitude? Others, I suppose, don't put it on.
Well, there are a lot of different reasons. My own feeling is that these people feel that to like a man is illegitimate. Therefore, if I'm a woman, it's only legitimate for women to like men. So therefore, if I'm attracted to men to make myself legitimate, I have to become some sort of pseudo-female. This is really something maybe out of 100 homosexuals, maybe a half a dozen will be really what you'd call very Nelly or effeminate. And these people are not particularly attractive. Sometimes these people get very effeminate to try to attract heterosexual males. You know, in the bisexual area, there are a lot of heterosexual males that'll go out and consider that a male dressed like a woman or acting like a woman, they, even though they're genitally a member of the same sex, they sort of play a very strictly structured role game in which they feel they're male, even though they go to bed with a homosexual.
Okay. Hello, Hotline.
Okay, Randy?
Yes?
Okay, Randy, what's your stand on this as far as the Army goes on homosexuals? Because I myself think it's too strict.
Well, to begin with, when you go into the service, you have to declare yourself, or you risk, you have to commit perjury. I declared myself and was exempted from the draft, which, considering the current war, the Vietnam War, I'm very proud to be for after being homosexual. In World War II, I think I would have lied and gone in to serve my country. A large number of homosexuals do go into the service, and there's a real sad situation here because if the service then finds out you're homosexual, sometimes a homosexual will get in, and after 6 months he'll find that the living in the barracks and the discipline that, you know, he just can't adjust to life in the Army. He'll ask to be discharged, and they'll insist on giving him a dishonorable or general or less than desirable discharge, even though he's had no sexual activity with any other servicemen. And, you know, just the very fact that he's homosexual. Now, there are a lot of court cases now fighting these things.
You mean it's just because that he is homosexual that they'll put him out, right?
Right, and they'll put him out. It's, you know, it's fine. If they want to let a man go, let him go with an honorable discharge. Say, okay, you know, it's not working out, you know, you have a good record in the Army, here's your discharge, leave. But they don't. They stigmatize a man for life. And then when he goes for private employment or for a government job, he has to explain why he has a general or dishonorable discharge.
I agree with you there on the discharge idea, but do you think a homosexual should be allowed to... now, for instance, I'm heterosexual. Now, I dig women. Okay, now, if they put me into a WAC barracks, it ain't going to work.
Well, you know, only the United States exempts us, and all the military.
So what do you do with a homosexual?
In Europe, in Sweden, and in other countries,
look, if men turn you on, and you have to live and sleep and eat in the same barracks with other men.
You do it in college dorms. You do it throughout society. Homosexuals wouldn't have too much trouble controlling themselves. You simply go off base and have your own private activities outside. If you are worried about segregating and this sort, I believe some of the European countries let homosexuals specialize in things like nursing or medical corps.
Reacts the same as a heterosexual, then I'm just telling you that they couldn't put me...
We're used to hiding.
Yeah, but you couldn't put me into a women's barracks for 6 months.
Yeah, but on the other hand, if you were to go into a room full of naked women and take a shower with them, you would probably physically react. I could go into a room full of naked men and take a shower, and I would have no reaction at all. Simply, a homosexual learns self-control.
No, I'd probably be embarrassed to death if I were in a whole room full of women.
No, but the point I'm making is that a homosexual learns to live a camouflage life and to hide his inclinations and desires from other people. And you wouldn't want to be known in a military situation anyway. I mean, most of the homosexuals in the Army are very undercover, and a large number of homosexuals go into the Army and serve with distinction. One of the fellows in our book said the Army gave me a medal for killing a man and a dishonorable discharge for loving one.
Ron?
Yeah.
I understand now. You were saying that if you were put in a wax bag, it'd be awful hard for you.
Yeah.
Say that in due time, you would become used to it.
Oh, I suppose you're right. Yes, and I suppose you're right.
You have it happening here with these co-ed dormitories. Yeah. Women on one floor, men on the other. I mean, you know, I haven't heard of any mass rapes or anything. I mean, people just learn social control, that's all.
I mean, it's just a matter of control.
Right. Nudist colonies, I suppose. I suppose you're right. Okay, I thank you very much for calling.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Bye-bye. All right, we'll be back in just a moment.
Gentlemen, I'm pleased to report that our combined efforts have been paying off. Both the syphilis and gonorrhea forces are showing nice gains. And today, I'm happy to say that Operation VD has reached epidemic proportions. The future looks bright. Enemy opposition is not mobilized. In fact, the enemy doesn't even know the symptoms of VD. And to think all they'd have to do is go to the library. It's a good thing we can't hide from a simple test. And if detected, we don't stand a chance against their defense weapons. But don't worry. Looking to the future, it looks like we'll have another good year. Informed sources indicate that the enemy doesn't care about education and early detection. This on-the-spot reporting has been brought to you by the American Osteopathic Association.
Hello, Hotline.
I've been to a lot of gay bars. A lot of my friends are gay. And I'd like to say that they're really more than a straight person is. Like, you can go to a straight bar, and the people aren't as friendly. The guys, they think you want to take them home and everything else. But if you go to a gay bar, everybody's more friendly to you, and they're not like everybody puts them up, like they attack everybody and they run after everybody.
Oh, baloney.
You're heterosexual.
Come on.
Are you heterosexual?
Yes.
Now this
That's
girl
a ridiculous statement to make.
There
are, as the gentleman calling before said, there are people who accost him, homosexuals who have accosted him. There are also men who will accost you in a bar.
There's been a lot.
What?
There have been a lot of men that have done that to me.
Right. And they're
Heterosexual
wrong.
men.
Okay, they're wrong, right?
Yes, they are.
All right, but to say that the gay people are all the greatest and the others are not, that's ridiculous.
All the greatest, but they are more friendly to everyone.
Homosexuals,
Sexually.
unknown to most people, are very fond of very liberal and open-minded women. And when a woman such as this lady on the phone goes into a gay bar, generally she'll be received very well and treated with deference, and the people will really put themselves out to be friendly.
Well, I gotta find out
Some women prefer to date homosexuals because they're great company and they don't try to
dear, when you go
drag
into
them
a
to bed.
regular straight bar? What happens? Does somebody attack you or what? Or are you afraid to sit there and talk to men?
No, if you go into a straight bar and you're a girl, the guys just don't walk up and talk to you to be friendly. They either walk up and talk to you to take you home and get you into bed, or they walk up and talk to you to take you home and maybe date you. But no one actually just comes up to be friendly, sits around and talks and leaves. There always has to be like a catch to it.
Well, that's ridiculous. This is a he-she relationship.
You sound like
can't you make friends with these people? Can't you just sit and talk to somebody?
She's saying heterosexuals accost her in public places. She should have given us the same complaint.
That's what I said. Oh, I agree.
Yeah, right.
I agree that this happens. But if you can't handle the situation, you shouldn't be let out of the house.
I can't handle the situation.
Well, that's darned unfortunate.
Well,
You have a lot of growing up to do.
I think you're being really overly severe. I mean, she wants to meet people and to relate to people on a social level rather than being treated as a sex
She can meet
object.
them and relate to them. That's right.
To have a lot of
Then open your mouth when you're talking to them and talk, dear.
and I'd like them just to be friends, but most straight boys just don't want to be friends with girls.
Well, I'm sure you have some straight boyfriends that are that way, and I'm sure you enjoy their company as much as your gay friends, don't you?
Then I would examine my conversation, dear.
No, there isn't. When you go to straight people, the guys aren't as friendly as the gay people. The guys want a girlfriend. They have other friends like girls, but like most group of boys do not want to be friends with certain girls, straight ones.
Well, there are some who are that way and some who are not, but somehow it manages to work. We have a lot of marriages. So what you're saying is ridiculous.
No, when you go to
somehow people find some sort of a meaningful relationship, heterosexual relationship, and they do it sometimes meeting at a bar, sometimes meeting at a church function, or sometimes meeting in school or at work or wherever they might meet.
But meeting as people, not meeting just as so much flesh on a meat rack or something in a one-night stand pickup situation. I think this is what the woman is complaining about.
Yes, that's what it is. You want to walk in and be friends with people, and most of the straight numbers don't want to be like that.
I think it's fine to make social friends in all social circles, but I certainly wouldn't eliminate heterosexuals, and I wouldn't come down on them too hard because they make sexual overtures to you.
They are too severe. They don't.
You just got through saying before, Randy, that this gentleman should be pleased that the homosexuals found him attractive. I think this gal should be pleased that men find her attractive.
I agree, and I think that she should be put off those people that come on in a way to her that she doesn't like, and make friends with those males who come on to a way in which she's treat her as a person and relate to her as a human being.
Right. That's all I'm saying, and I agree with you. Okay, I thank you for calling, and I hope you can solve your problem of talking to men.
Okay, thank you.
All right, bye-bye. Hello, Hotline.
Hi, Ron.
Yes.
I just want to tell you I enjoyed your show very much.
Thank you.
I wanted to put a question to the author.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing a study at school. I go to Penn State, and I'm interested in finding out how most homosexuals get started. You know, when they first deal with other fellas. Like you hear a lot, you know.
Or women dealing with other women. Again, the male chauvinism is coming in.
Well, yeah, it's funny because people do think of homosexuals generally as being male, but, you know, there are a large number of females are homosexual, too. I think it varies a great deal. If a person comes out very young, say a person 14 or 15 years old knows they're homosexual and wants to meet other homosexuals, unfortunately they're relegated to beaches or parks or areas where homosexuals congregate because they can't go to private clubs. Most homosexuals, when they come out, if they're drinking age or older, will go to social clubs or private parties and meet people in a general course of life like everyone else.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I thank you for calling, sir. Goodbye. Hello, Hotline.
Yes, I'd like to know, what about the homosexual that goes with a dude now that feels on a woman's legs? Now, I'd like to know this here. Like, the homosexual playing both parts, but still they come up to another person and say, like, wow, I want to feel on your legs. But still, they had their own say. Now, I'd like to know, from his point of view, how would he feel if he went up to a woman and felt on her legs?
Well, you mean homosexuals come up to you?
Bisexual?
Yeah. No, she's not, homosexual at all. But, like, she has been around him for all her life, you might as well say. And, like, he goes up and feels on her legs and stuff. And so, like, well, I want to rip you off. Now, what's that? Will he come on that one?
I find it hard to really understand what you're talking about. Some woman comes over and puts her hand on your legs.
A homosexual dude.
Well, then he's not a homosexual. I assume you're female. You sound female.
Yes, I am, all female.
Well, I don't think homosexuals are running around and slipping their hands up women's legs. At least the homosexuals I know aren't. Most of them aren't.
The male homosexuals.
The male homosexuals.
I'm telling you for the experience. Like,
What, is there a man who does this to you?
no, I'm pure woman. Like, say, a homosexual.
It's a woman that does this to you?
That's what she said, I think, originally.
My legs. And say, like, oh, wow, I want to rip you off. I want to do this, I want to do that to you.
This is a woman who's doing this to you, right?
Man, a homosexual.
Oh, he's a homosexual, but he does
Well, then
this
I'd
to you.
say he's a bisexual, and in this context, he's a homosexual. I mean, he's a heterosexual with you.
What do you think that, like, the...
I don't think that sounds very nice to come to somebody and say, I want to rip you off. It doesn't sound to me like a great opening line in lovemaking. I mean, I wouldn't be turned on by that kind of approach.
Well, I can understand that, but I mean, like saying, do you think that, like, he will, I mean, you think the world will be this way as being a homosexual?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, it seems to me just sort of a wacky situation.
Saying, no, it's a wacky situation. Like saying, okay, one night you rip off a dude, next night you rip off a woman, and they don't know,
What is this ripping off? I think that's I mean,
ways to go?
I wouldn't like anyone...
Please don't ask for an explanation. I think you can understand it. I think the point she's making is she doesn't understand the bisexual.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah, she doesn't understand that. Now,
Well,
Randy,
I mean, some men like to go with both sexes.
And some
most
women,
people
I
that are
suppose.
bisexual tend to have a preference there.
All the way as being a homosexual. Why not be it? Why pretend to be one way?
Because some people, they're not pretending. Some people are genuinely attracted to members of both sexes, and this seems to be the case of the person you're talking about.
A woman came up to you and approached you as being this way?
Would a woman come up and approach me?
If a woman can approach you, like say maybe she may be something that you never had or seen before, and she came up, would you go as far as to approach her and like doing the same thing on the sly?
Well, I'm bisexual enough that if I found her attractive, which I find some women, I might go to bed with her if she approached me. I mean, I certainly wouldn't go off and make a gross physical pass at her.
Some of the homosexual goes both ways and say, like, you may see some woman attractive. Now, I can understand this here. This is what I want to know. Because, like, I have worked around them, and I know, and this has really puzzled me, because I have a whole lot that had came up to me and told me, like, I want to rip you off, I want to do this, I want to do that.
Well, I think what you have to understand is there are some people who are bisexual. They go both ways, okay? I thank you for calling. Goodbye. That is all the time that we have. I thank you, Randy, for being on our hotline program. Kay Tobin and Randy Wicker wrote this. It's called The Gay Crusaders. There it is up behind me. And if you read it, I think you'll be educated into a minority within the United States. It's not so small a minority, really.
No, it isn't. And could I say that anyone that wants to get involved with Gay Love here, write the Pittsburgh Gay Times, Post Office Box 10184, Shady Side, here in Pittsburgh. Post Office Box 10184. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for being on Hotline. Tomorrow night we have an open hotline, and we'll discuss just about anything under the sun. And I imagine we'll probably get back to this subject tomorrow night, too. Thanks again. Good night.
Thank you.